Updating contaminated sites legal instrument templates. So it's been 2 years since the version 7.0 of the templates came out, and now we've been working on it for 2 years on version 8.0. And 6 months ago, I thought we were pretty close, but then my colleague managers got a hold of these templates, and we've turned them inside out. So I'm going to talk about what are some of the issues with the current templates, and then we've only looked at the certificate because it's most complicated, and then a lot of the changes we're proposing for that will apply to the other templates. So what needs to be changed? Well, when we've looked at this, it's apparent that the current templates are kind of disorganized. They're cluttered. First of all, if you want location information on the site, well, you look on the first page, but then you got to look for the maps in an appendix. So they're not in the same place. The environmental media and standards, on reflection, is very unusual. You know it's the residential land use on the very first page, but what standards apply and what substances you have to look in Schedule C. So why are these things separated? And to tell you the truth, by doing that, it makes it very difficult sometimes to know what uses apply to what standards. And then the documents. Some documents were listed in the preamble to the schedules, and some were listed in the schedules themselves. They're all over the place. So, and then another issue is, what do you do when you've got multiple parts of parcels or multiple uses at a site? That's your question, the multiple uses. There's nowhere in the current templates that really lay out easily how to accommodate that. The unclear wording, we haven't given very good guidance on the wording to use in these principal risk management conditions. So we've tried to do that, but still, I've made lots of changes in these draft instruments over the last few months. And then some of the positioning of clauses. There's a tension that we experience in these templates, and one thing is we want to give people information. We want to say, if you change the land use at this site, your instrument's not going to be valid. And where do you put that? It's not a legal requirement. It's just information. The things in Schedule B are things you want to enforce. They're conditions you want to enforce. So why would you have a bit of information in there? So that particular one has been in the covering letter, it's been in Schedule B, and it's also been in the part before all the schedules. So in some instruments, you see it 3 times. Holy cow, you only need to hear it once. So, and this clause about you must have qualified consultants on the site if you encounter future contaminants at the site. What are we going to do? Are we going to throw someone in, give them a fine because they don't hire a qualified consultant? And that was in Schedule B? It doesn't make sense at all. That's just, to me, a bit of information. So that's now going to go in the covering letter. Whatever I say, don't interpret what I say as a done deal, because these are still draft and we're still changing them. But so here's what we expect to be seeing in the COC template. First of all, we're going to have a version number 8.0 in the footer on each page. So when that comes in, I'm going to be looking for 8.0, and if it's not there, I'm going to send it back. We have to have the current templates. So what that means is Catherine's going to have that on her submission manager, and you're going to need to be using that. Because I don't want to spend a lot of time hunting around to make sure that these clauses are correct from some old version. We're busy people, and I really don't want to do that. The uses of the environmental media, that's now in Schedule C. The substances and the uses are all going to be linked together. The land descriptions, out of the first part, and if you want to know where the site is, and anything about the location and the legal description, it's all going to be in Schedule A. The warning footer, in 7.0, there's some warning footers about certain things to do with vapors and sediment. Actually, those are gone now, and they really will be gone in version 8.0. And then all the documents will be in a new Schedule D. So, the first page will be very short and sweet now. It's less than a page long. Really simple. So that's one of the things. You don't want to be the clutter. It's just better organized. So Schedule A, like I said, it'll be the legal land descriptions and the locations, and even the legal land description section has been reorganized and simplified. It's a lot more streamlined. Schedule B clauses. So that first clause, that's the clause about, and if you change the land, water, the vapor sediment uses, you might invalidate the certificate. And by the way, you've got to tell them, send a written reminder to the director that you've changed it. So there were two clauses like that. There was one for numerical standards and one for risk-based standards. Those have been merged. And now there's two options now. Option one is just like that I described. It's where you're not using vapor attenuation factors. And there's a new clause that Colin just drafted up last week if you're using vapor attenuation factors. So that's where all the vapor attenuation stuff will be contained in Schedule B in that clause 1. And trenches are mentioned there too, so that's a good thing. So my understanding is, and correct me if I'm wrong, if you've got trench workers, it'll be covered off there and within your risk assessments. So there won't be a separate trench worker clause. Is that correct, Colin?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. I'm just going to remind you of these risk controls by type, and this is in Procedure 12, and these were part of the drafts. The version 7.0 templates. So it's changed now. We used to have just Type 1, but now it's been split into Type 1A and 1B, and the 1A is where the intrinsic, the engineering, and the administrative controls are not needed to control the risk. And Type 1B is where the intrinsic controls are needed, but not the other two, the administrative and engineering controls. And then we have Type 2, whereas you have, institutional controls, but not administrative controls. You have institutional or engineering controls, and if they fail, you're not going to have a huge problem. And then Type 3 is same as that, except if they do fail, you will have a big problem. So we've got some conditions that are now used in Schedule B, for various types of these scenarios. So we've renamed the principal risk controls, principal risk management conditions are now out the door, that terminology. And we're continuing with the requirements, 3 requirements, that they be present or implemented and maintained, those controls, that approved professionals sign off on those, about meeting those controls, and that if there's a performance verification plan required, then that'll be cited as a condition in the Schedule B. Risk-based CFCs for types 2 and 3, those 3 clauses I just mentioned, plus there may be a requirement to undertake an operation and maintenance plan if it's part of the principal risk controls. And then Schedule C is going to look very different. The template itself is quite a bit longer, but it accommodates the situation where there's more than one parcel at a site. You could have 2 or 3 parcels with different land uses. It could address the situation where you have multiple land or water or sediment vapor uses. You could have that occurring. All those are allowed. And then we have 5 different types of standards. Standards for numerical standards, risk-based, background, site-specific numerical standards, and hazardous waste. So all those might occur, or some of them might occur at a site. So all those uses, and the uses themselves are now in Schedule C. They're not in the first part. And then Schedule D, again, all the documents are going to be listed. And the other templates, I haven't made the changes yet, but basically they're all going to have 4 schedules. And in the case of the determinations, the Schedule B, I think, usually will be blank. It'll just say no conditions, because the only one that used to be there was you have to have a qualified professional to, check out the contamination if you're doing future subsurface work. That one, that'll be in the covering letter now. But there might be circumstances where you have conditions in a determination, but I can't think of any that. Maybe for a positive determination, maybe. So, look at that, right on time.
Thank you, John. Any questions on that one?
My question's kind of on multiple land uses, but it's kind of a weird one because on certain sites, if there's a stream flowing through it, there's a riparian setback, which is sometimes unknown until they develop the site. How will the determinations handle that now?
Yeah, it's difficult. You know what I would suggest is give it your best guess, and then when you do know, write us and say, I'd like to amend these boundaries. And that's something that could be done quite simply, I think. You can request an amendment, but we can't initiate that ourselves.
Because it's just a standard statement in there, must meet parkland or something.
Yeah. But you got to know the boundaries. And this came up, I remember, a few weeks ago, didn't it? It was you. Yeah. And I thought about it, and that's what I thought. That was my answer I came up with. How does that sound?
Sounds good.
Okay.
Great. Anyone else on this one?
Yeah, I can answer that. It's when we stop tweaking them. And to tell you the truth, I don't know for sure, but I think all of us are kind of fed up with it. And I'm thinking maybe later this summer. And here's the reason why. We haven't talked about this internally, but the society, once we send the templates over, they have to be incorporated into the submissions manager, and that's a computing issue that has to be, dealt with. And it's going to take probably a month or so to do that.
Yeah, 6 weeks.
6 weeks, so it might even be in the fall. The other thing I'd like to do is I'd like to kind of test run these on a few people. So I was thinking of doing that internally, and just to make sure that, they work really smoothly and slickly. We're don't want to spend a whole bunch of time on these things and then find out there's issues that come up because they're not easy to use.
Any other questions?
Catherine's got a question.
I don't have a question, but I was just going to say, John, we could probably get a couple of people to volunteer through our technical review committee to, take a look at it for you.
Okay, so Catherine's volunteered a couple of technical committee review people to give them a test run. So that's a kind offer. Thank you. Okay, thank you so much.